I am very glad that my pain brings you joy. Heidi ho there, and welcome to another episode of Tech Deck Karaoke. I'm glad I was already able to get Sabrina Schaefer Esquire laughing. That might ease her up on the clowning me throughout the episode. We are joined today with JP, and I'm extremely excited to have JP here. We've known each other for quite a long time across a lot of different roles, and he has some content I have absolutely no expertise in that I'm about to present like I know it, because I've never let incompetence stop me. JP, welcome. You want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm JP Morgenthal. Right now, I am an SVP with AlixPartners, which is a management consulting firm, and we handle digital consulting for customers, as well as mergers and acquisitions and business transformations. A lot of fun. Got there only recently. Loving it, though. Getting back to consulting and really getting to dig in with clients. So, really happy to be here. And as Joe said, we've known each other a very long time. I saw some clips of the show, and reached out to him and said, "Hey, I want to do this with you." And here I am.
Awesome. We appreciate that. And everyone is always welcome to reach out. We're always looking for new guests. So if you are interested, come on. And JP, I love that you're back in consulting. The consulting world, as we both know, is a mixed bag, but the opportunities you get to learn a customer's business, their challenges, and solve it with problems with some outside perspective is huge. And I think that outside perspective is extremely helpful in many cases, because there's so much pain attached to our day job that it's hard to look at it without that emotional attachment.
Look, I did managed services, and then I did a vendor again, and I've done vendors in the past. And everybody in the tech sector really comes with this promise of solution, right? And that's always been a theoretically a good thing. Like, I'm going to get to help solve a problem. And it seems like for the past 25 years of my career, that sales has been in the lead, and it's always been about trying to find a problem for the solution versus the other way around. And one of the things that really attracted me when I was interviewing for this role was the different culture here. There's no bias, there's no preconceptions. It's luck. These people want to save money. We're going to look at everything. We're going to open up the crack holes, and we're going to peek inside. And whatever we find, that's what we're going to attack. And that just provides so much opportunity, because it's like, all of a sudden the number of levers you have, you're no longer constrained by what the CIO's politics are, or who's friends with this vendor, or, we have to get we have to sell this much of this product in order to maintain our certification, which I know you would deal with companies all the time, right? And so it's like, nope, look, there's a hole, let's fill it. And it just allows you to really explore creatively, and not just I'm a digital SME. That's great. I bring to my company all the knowledge of cloud and automation, but it's how it's applied. How is it applied to retail? How is it applied to chemical management, to financial services, right? And and you're not constrained in any way, and you're not put in a box and said, "Hey, don't talk about taxes. That's not your box. Right. Just tell me about how the network works."
Agreed. I've had the vendor roles, and I have nothing against the vendor roles. I very, very much enjoyed them. But the one thing I always felt very limiting in my vendor roles is that every tool in my toolbox was vendor flavored, right? So there were always, at a big tech company, you always have bad products. There's no way around that. There were always bad products I would theoretically be supposed to position, or gaps I couldn't fill, holes I couldn't fill because they weren't in our portfolio. And I like this external role for myself a lot better. Yeah. So Sabrina, I would say welcome, but it'd be an overstatement. So hello is what I will go with. How are you?
I am doing well. Hello, everyone. Sick, but still alive. I would not miss an opportunity, even on my deathbed, really to haze you, Joe, and to have JP here as my, trusted confidant to haze you together. Yeah, I cannot be more excited for this moment. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, I am very glad that my pain brings you joy. And I think with that, we are ready to kick off. I'm going to open up JP's presentation and find out what I'll be talking about.
Right.
And it appears that I'm going to be speaking about the new metrics of automation. Again, this is a topic that I have absolutely no clue with. So let's see if I can pretend like I do. Kick it off. The basics. Automation gets a mixed bag like many other things. When we look at automation, what are we really trying to do? Now, the first thing that we tried to do with automation in the early days of automation and IT infrastructure was to gain major efficiencies and to be able to move faster with what we were doing to get ahead of our business or our mission. And that is still very applicable, but in many cases, one of the things we look at with automation today is that it is a requirement based on the scale and change rate of the IT operations we're driving. So whereas before it could be a business an enabler or a business advantage, today it's very often becoming a business requirement. I cannot operate my environments without some level of automation because of that scale and change rate that we're creating. And those two tie together. You could have large scale with low change rate and maybe not have a high need for automation. And you can have low scale with high change rate and very much need automation. But the two bleed together quite a bit. That increases speed and scale discussed here. Increasing quality is a thing that often doesn't get talked about when we talk about automation. One of the ways that automation increases quality is by replicating known good, repeatable tasks in that known good fashion. When we use humans for repeatable tasks that are the same every time, there's always a chance for human error, especially when human boredom and human fatigue comes into play, which exists all over our IT operations stack. So we can increase quality by properly implementing automation. And that means implementing it with the proper testing, the proper qualitative metrics to know that it's working correctly, and verifying it over time as our environment changes. And then to that same point, automation can help improve employee morale. It doesn't matter who you are, doing a repeatable task all day long can get monotonous and boring. Now, maybe you enjoy that in a hobby. Maybe there's something you like to get away from your real life that is monotonous, and that repeatability helps soothe you at the end of the day. But in your primary role, those things are probably weighing you down. So you can improve employee morale by both removing those tasks, but also giving them some free time and stress reduction back by alleviating some of those pieces so that they can focus on higher level or more important aspects.
So critique, all right, on slide one. Not even a critique. I'm going to pull the curtain back for your viewers on Oz, right? So the first thing listening to you, I'm like, very good. I'm like, oh, I get it. This is very much like the magician who gets you to the answer that he wants or she wants you to have by understanding human behavior. And in the case of Tech Deck, there's probably only about 25 words that matter at a high level. And you get low level, and you've done low level, right? I mean, we can talk about sending data.
Joe gets low.
But for the magician, it's 25 words. And if you know how to talk to those 25 words, it doesn't matter where they show up on the slide. You've got the line, you've got the spiel that comes out behind it, right? So efficiency, speed and scale, quality, those are top 5 of the 25 words that you need to know in order to talk to any CIO anywhere in the world, right? So I think you did great. I'm not criticizing you, but it's just, I get it. I get why you can do this. It's because you've mastered those 25 words and you have spiel that goes to those 25 words.
Agreed. And I appreciate you both noticing and commenting that, right? My role in Tech Deck Karaoke is very much to pick something on your topic and bring it back to something that I can talk about. And this is a skill that any sales engineer or consultant or salesperson should understand, right? You can watch it in politicians all the time. You watch any given political debate, and it doesn't matter who you're watching, they get asked a question about the economy. And if they don't want to talk about the economy, they'll pull a thread from the question and take it over to talk about war in China. Whatever their topic of comfort or point they want to make, they're drawing it back to where they want to go.
Oh.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here.
I always thought it was the Judy Hopps method. You know the Judy Hopps method from Zootopia? You repeat
No.
back. You know, what color is green? Oh, what color is green? Well, let me tell you about, and then you redefine the answer, the question the way you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do appreciate Sabrina's pointing out my tendency and desire to go the Little John route and get low. Why do we measure? So the reason we measure goes back to one of the points I made on that last slide. Automation is only useful when it's properly implemented. There's an old quote that I don't know who to attribute to, but I love it. And it's, to err is human, to apply that error to 1,000 servers at once is automation. And that's automation gone wrong, right? So one of the reasons we measure is to maintain that quality and efficiency of our automation over time and ensure that it's doing the proper job in its current environment. Again, if we're automating, the chances are we have some scale and some change rate issues that we're addressing through automation. So if we have scale and change rate, the idea that things are going to stay constant over time is a moot point. So we want to make sure that we can quantifiably measure how our automation is working so that we can drive the results that automation is intended to drive. It helps us seek to understand. It allows us to improve and optimize automation over time. It allows us to abandon or reinvent automation that's no longer working for our business, or in some cases wasn't working in the first place. It can help us both monetize and manage costs. So there are ways to measure our automation to make these improvements that can both drive new revenue streams and reduce costs of existing cost centers.
That's interesting. You tied slide 2 back to the theme of the deck, which is, or the theme of the activity, which is the metrics of automation. Just, we'll talk about how I did it and how I delivered this, but this was a very generic slide in general. Why do we measure? Why do we measure anything? Right? It was almost philosophical in the way it was delivered. Right? Why in the hell bother measure anything? Why would you bother measuring anything? Now, you not knowing what you were up against, you're like, okay, this one has to relate to that one. So it's interesting to hear the approach that you took, not knowing that, right? But this was my philosophy slide. I have a lot of philosophy slides I intermingle with my tech.
I always love.
I think the difference, JP, between you and Joe is you like to make your audience think.
That's why they hate me. That's why people hate me. It's like, it's making me think. My head hurts.
Don't do it. That's
they
awesome.
They want to be told. They just want to be fed. It's like,
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at measurement and the analytics of a system that's in place, it's an area that often gets ignored a bunch. But there are parallels in places where we've seen a lot of value, and one of the ones that keeps coming to mind here goes back to a lot of your background. You've got a lot of background in software development, software management, software optimization. And when you look at that, one of the coding methodologies that's prevalent today is the idea of, and I forget the full term, but it's test-based coding, where we build the test cases, the test scenarios, and the test code
and TDD, yeah,
right,
development, yeah.
And the same thing can apply here, where we want to automate, right? But I also want to know that automation is proper and doing its job and effective for the business. So there are cases where you may want to understand your measurements before you start implementing that automation so that you can test or move into a fail fast methodology, whatever it may be, with the quantifiable data to do that correctly.
So So interestingly, and I wrote about this somewhere, maybe even in my book. I wrote a book, So You Want to Be a Programmer, for people who think that they wanted to, change careers to be a programmer because there's so much money to be made in it. And I was like, but yeah, before you do that boot camp, you might want to assess whether you really made it cut out for this, right? So I wrote a book for people like looking there. But the interesting thing is universities, in general, don't focus on this. I have, both an undergrad and a graduate degree in computer science. Never focus on the measurement from a KPI approach. Yeah, measure CPU performance all the way through. That was a whole class that it was like calculus, but worse. And it was based off the Spark microprocessor to make your life even more miserable. But the only thing I got out of it is like I can warm my hands on it in the wintertime, right? But really measuring things. And the funny thing is now with AI and all of this, behavioral instrumentation that's going on, it's really a great fun conversation to have with people. Why are you measuring that? What are you really trying to understand with that point of data? And it's not just tech. I mean, I did a walkthrough of some data distribution centers recently, looking for optimization performance in those. And it's like, we measure the performance of the pickers. I'm like, I could see why that's important, but, really, is the KPI tell you what you're really after? Or is it some approximation of what you're trying to understand? 9 times out of 10, it's like, a lot of these metrics have been in place for 30 years. Nobody's questioned them. No one's actually ever looked at them and poured over the data or run it through an AI engine and said, tell me what you see, right? And you see what you get 9 times out of 10 is garbage. This is measuring and metrics is truly garbage in, garbage out.
Agreed. And I love the book title. So you want to be a programmer superstar, live large, nice house, nice car.
I have a little test in the back for people. I'm like, that walks people through. Do you really want to do this? And the whole theme of the book, the whole attitude of the book is, here's what I've gone through in my life. Are you sure you really want to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another nice thing about the measurements and the idea of measurements and the value of measurements is that if I have to define what I'm going to measure, then I also have to define the value I'm trying to get. So it kind of forces you to backtrack to why I'm automating in the first place, because anything you're measuring has to have value to your business. Otherwise, you're not going to take the time to measure it. But in the interest of time, we will keep moving into measuring what we automate. So when we look at what are the questions, what are the things that businesses are struggling with? First, what are the right things to measure, and how do they know if their given automation programs are successful, right? We can automate. We can build automation. We've been building automation for years. In my network engineering past or network administration past, one of the things we would do is almost copy and paste CLI or command line interface code from switch to switch and call that automation, right? As we're building higher and more intelligent automation, it's automation that can intake if then else statements, basically not run things unless conditions are met.
And viewers, just so you know, what he left out is that's why the internet goes down sometimes.
That is one major reason why the internet goes down. The second major reason why the internet goes down is that the administrator on the command line, when they added a VLAN to a trunk, they forgot the command line word add and just changed the trunk to the new single VLAN instead of adding it into the rest. And if you're not in networking, you won't get that joke. But if you are, you just laughed. The other things we need to look at are what are the primary sponsors and their expectations. So again, this is really getting into what is the business trying to get out of this RPA or this automation process, right? We need to understand what the value is to the different key stakeholders so that we can properly define measurements to meet those goals. And then finally, I want to reduce labor. I want to save money. I want to reduce focus, etc. that's not necessarily the right goal to go after in today's automation. These are all ancillary benefits. These are all things that can be achieved through automation, but you should be looking at higher value targets as you're looking to achieve these lower value goals. Next, establishing your success criteria. And this is always important. Sabrina just ran the Chicago Marathon, her first marathon. She had to first decide she was going to try this thing. Second, she had to establish success criteria. Her success criteria wasn't coming in the top 10 in her first marathon. Her success criteria was finishing that gauntlet of a long race and coming across the finish line. So when we know our success criteria, we can backtrack into those qualitative metrics that we need to assess to get there.
Mine would have been don't die.
Don't die. She did both. She finished and she did not die, according to all accounts.
Yeah. So far, so good.
So as we're establishing this criteria, we're looking for things like how can we understand what type of time waste is being had? We need to look to increase the accuracy of our information so that we can drive that additional profitability or cost savings. We need to understand that complex operations will be harder and more complex to automate, meaning they will take more time, they will take more cost to automate. So all of these things need to be understood to establish that overall success criteria. Now we need to look at what are the modern automation metrics. What are we looking at from a metrics and measurements perspective in automation today? First, task waste rating. What is the wasted time going into a given manual process today? Something we would look to alleviate. What are the intelligent automation quotients? What are our appetite and requirement for how much of higher level intelligent automation we need versus maybe lower level intelligent automation? What is our current human activity quotient? How many of our processes are being done by humans, and how many of those can be automated? And the answer is most can probably be automated. The dirty secret there is you're going to have to know what the process is before you can automate it. So you've got to find a way to document that manual process before you can build it in and therefore come out to what your success metrics will be on the back end. And then get down to complexity ratings. How hard will these tasks be to automate? Once you have an idea of the value that task will give you if automated and the complexity of automating that task, you now have two important pieces of information from which to prioritize your automation process. And then several other factors weigh in here, but I'm not going to read you the slide because I don't know what's on it. Next steps. How do we look at this? How do we address it? First, we're going to baseline what we have today. Baseline how our operation happens, what those manual processes are, or what those processes are that need to have automation built or automation improved.
I think it's a build out.
From that baseline of the automation goals we have, those low-level tasks that we want to automate, now we can begin to categorize them. Where do they fit into our IT infrastructure stack? Where do they fit into our business process? And also, where do they fit into our priorities and goals based on the business? Next, we can begin to optimize those processes wherever possible. Now, one thing I always like to talk about with automation in this context is the idea of optimizing the manual process before automating it. The more steps I can remove, the more linear and repeatable the steps I can create, the easier it's going to be to automate. So an hour put into optimization will save me an hour or more on the automation piece, which is our next step. And then finally, to the point of JP's message here, as we begin to automate, we also need to be looking at that measurement. How are we going to measure the success of our automation as we move forward? And this is the culmination of the concept we want to talk about. All of these things work together in a circular fashion. We're going to be continuously doing this process. This isn't a one and done or a do these 5 steps and walk away. We're going to go through this process again and again as technology improves, as our business requirements change, and as things evolve. And that is why we measure and help to optimize our automation stacks.
Good job. I mean, really, I think you did a great job for just opening a deck and going through it. I go back to my wizard. I think, a lot of this, for you especially, right? You said it. especially around the network and the network administration and your time at Cisco, and really a lot of what you were trying to do, the whole value proposition you sold at Cisco was all about automation in many regards. So automation is not a foreign concept.
No. No.
But you nailed the points well. For the most part, I love the ratings and quotient one. I was like, okay, let's see what he does with this.
I was grabbing at straws on that one. Hopefully it didn't show through too much.
No, actually, no. You hit it pretty well. The main point I actually hit on that slide is that nothing is explicit or specific to a number. It's a range. It's a continuum, right? And a lot of people don't think of measuring in this way. They think is it a 4 or a 5? Now, funny story. I was a software engineer. Got really great, at doing all this distributed computing stuff back in the days of Corba and DCE and distributed comm. So I actually, was so deep into this stuff that I did a user group on Corba storage versus DCOM storage. And I did it when I lived in New York. So this was done at one of the SIGs that was at like JP Morgan Chase headquarters. So it was well attended by the general Manhattan audience that is into that nonsense. And this guy comes up after me. He's like, "You got to meet my boss." His boss was Don Brown, DH Brown Associates. And so here I am, this engineer, and this guy now is like, "You should be an analyst." I'm like, "What the hell's an analyst?" And I had seen the name Gartner on PC Week, when I read the cover. Oh, Gartner says, "Ooh, it's Gartner," right? That's the way I was at that time. And this guy said, "You come here, I'll teach you how to be an analyst." Well, that worked great up until the point where he's like, "You'll run my middleware program." Okay, great. So I did a report on DCOM versus Corba versus RMI, and I did it my way, very qualitative. And then he's like, no, you got to get specific. I need a number here. I'm like, it's not like DCOM is 5 and Corba is 3. Now that's the way this guy did everything. Started with CAD/CAM and ERP, and MSRP systems, giving him, he was Gartner, one of Gideon's disciples. He was one of the first in there. So, he's very much quantitative. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't work that way. It's like, it depends on what the problem is, which is better. What good is Corba if I'm in an all Windows environment?
Right.
So I realized that we were never gonna be long-term partners in crime, and I learned that I learned how to be an analyst, and he was phenomenal. He taught me how to write, but I realized I had to be qualitative. I was a qualitative analyst, and that is the point here, right? It's all around. It depends. It's always contextual, but for a lot of this automation and for the measuring anything, it's contextual and it's a spectrum. You have to come up with the top end of the spectrum and the bottom end of the spectrum and be able to define those, and then kind of say where you fall between on those ends of this. So I use terms like rating and quotient, right? They're not definitive. You're not going to be a 5. You might be a 5 today, and tomorrow you could be a 7, and then next week you could be 3, right? In basketball, I love playing fantasy, daily fantasy, especially NBA. Man, the hardest thing in the world is, you got somebody like Doncic or Jokic, right? One day he's scoring 66 F points, so you're like, oh, I gotta bet Jokic. He's playing the same team in a back-to-back. The next day, you same team he just played, he gets a 36. I'm like, what the heck? Someday you're a 66, someday you're a 33, and that's just life.
Yeah, and I think that's an extremely important point. Is that these measurements will change as aspects of the environment and the environment around you change. With that, we've got, let's go ahead. You've got about 10 minutes. Take us through this and show me what I should have said.
Well, I mean, as I said, you did really well, right? So,
JP, I thought we were going to be friends after this, but not with you. Keep that nonsense up. I'm considering an unfollow. No, I'm just kidding.
well, as I said, top 25 words, and I used the top of the 5, and he's the master tap dancer. If I threw something deeply technical in there, I think he might have tripped over his shoelaces and fallen on his face. But this is stuff he's ultimately familiar with. But you hit it well here. Why automate, right? Number one, efficiency. Agility. That's the number one word. Get off of the money trail. Money comes when you're working efficiently. You'd be surprised how much money an efficient organization can make, right? When you're measuring the right things, when you're targeting the right things, when you're building the right things, when you're selling the right things, right? So, measure for that. And of course, speed and scale are critical only to the degree that you don't try to be bigger than you are. Because the number one point of all the startups that you and I have played with and done, the reason they fail is because they've all been forced to scale beyond their capabilities too quickly, right? So you measure for speed and scale so you know where the wall is and you don't drive into it, right? That's the biggest. Think about that from a business perspective. If you're driving a car and there's a wall in front of you, you're going to hit the brake. In business, there's no wall. Well, there could be a wall. You have to know where the wall is. Or as somebody who's sometimes really bad, like me, pulling in the garage, you hang the tennis ball so you don't take out the cabinets, right? And you can still close the garage door. You measure for that, right? And quality. People have to understand the importance of quality on the front end from an efficiency standpoint is uber critical. So much of where we spend time, and especially in technology, is cleaning up the mess that was created when stuff was in the beginning, right? Creation done poorly, we got to pay to clean it up, right? If you increase the quality on the inbound, you spend less time on the back end cleaning it up before you can use it. It's just very simple, right? And ultimately, it's a true point of fact. Doing those things make your employees, enjoy their job more, because nothing is worse than having to spend all your time fixing, putting out fires, and always with your hair on fire, nothing ever progressive or proactive, right? And you can get to there if you worry about the first 3, okay? So that's why we automate. Now, why do we measure? Right? A lot of people talk about measurement. Take a ruler to measure how big your wall is so that you can, order wallpaper or how much paint you need, right? The number one reason we measure anything is to understand it. Understand its metrics, understand its dimensions, right? But another reason why we also measure is to understand the bounds of something. Once we understand the boundaries, then we can improve it and optimize it. You can't optimize something unless you understand what its boundaries are, because you don't, again, know where the wall is, right? So you need to build yourself a box. This is how big we are. We're a Volkswagen or are we a bread box, right? And then once you know what you are, then you can say, I don't want to be a bread box. I want to be a Volkswagen. Great. I can build you a path from being a bread box to being a Volkswagen. But if you think you're a Volkswagen and you're a bread box, I can't help you, right? The other reason we measure is, especially in business, is to make money. If we're focusing on the wrong things, if we're spending our money in the wrong areas, then we're going to go out of business, right? So we need to know that we're effectively utilizing our assets and our cash. And so we're going to measure the aspects of our business that are balance sheet, inputs and outputs. And then finally, we measure to manage costs, right? if I don't know how much energy I use in my home, I'm not going to be all that cognizant about shutting off lights or making sure that I replace regular bulbs with LED bulbs, because I'm just going to assume, the heck, whatever it is, right? But if I measure it and I understand the impact, the cost to running a certain particular way, well, then I can say I can run cheaper. I can run less expensively, right? Without the answer being, got to get rid of labor, right? So I'm going to manage my costs. So then, the number one question I've always gotten regarding automation from people who are starting their programs or even in the middle of their programs is, am I measuring the right things? What should I be measuring? How do I know that my program is meeting my goal, right? And it's, in many regards, it's the same argument I've had in DevOps. Okay, well, where do you want to be, and where are you now, right? If you can't answer those questions, if you don't tell me what you think perfect looks like, then how do you know you're not perfect today? And it's think it right. There's that question again. Oh, he's making me think. Oh my God, it's painful, right? But seriously, if you don't know what you want to look like, it's like going into the beauty surgeon and saying, "Make me look good." What does that mean? I'm gonna make you look like a pig, right? Twilight Zone. And now you look like a pig, and you look like everyone else, right? No. What do you want to look like? And so that's a key component of defining your automation and the measuring around your automation. And unfortunately, so in business, it's a political thing, right? Who owns the requirements for automation? What are their expectations? What is business trying to get out of this, right? Now, we've seen a lot of this in the past where we push back and we say, you should want efficiency. You should want agility. You need to stop worrying about counting pennies. It's penny wise, pound foolish. But if somebody who owns the budget is saying, listen, I don't care. I want pennies taken off the table. Your job is to take pennies off the table. And so that's got to lead, your automation program. That's got to be the metrics and the measurements that you are focused on, not what you want to do or what you think is best, right? So that's the way of business. And then, again, the answer isn't always cut. Moving to improving, it's becoming more efficient, becoming more agile can sometimes lead to more growth opportunities than managing to the downside, right? And automation, unfortunately, has been plagued with projects that are focused on managing to the downside, right? But automation really should be a growth play if you're doing it right? And so if you're now, how do you do that? How do you get there? That is all around ROI. That's looking at what it is you want to automate, and then determining what is the upside opportunity if you're successful in this program. So biggest issue I've run across in my career, and I wonder, same with you, Joe, is tech people don't know how to write business plans. It's like, should be a course in high school, how to write it. Everybody should be able to write a business plan. Baseline, ground zero, because everybody wants to do something. Everybody wants to create something. And if you don't know how to explain to people why they should let you do that, then nobody's ever going to let you do that. And we have a lot of victims running around this planet, but they don't understand victimology actually stems from the point that they don't know how to write a business plan. They don't know how to prove to other people why their idea is good or why somebody should let them do what they're thinking of doing. And that is key when you're thinking about automating stuff. You have to be able to explain to somebody why this automation matters. Why should I spend X amount of dollars to do this now? I have all these other really high profile projects I got to get done. Why should I give you a resource to go do this? And Doesn't matter when I walk through the distribution center. Doesn't matter if I'm talking to somebody who's trying to get, their spreadsheets automatically, analyzed and reported out via email. It's always the same thing. IT doesn't have time for us. We were told we don't have a budget. It's like, did you ever prove to them or demonstrate to them why? Nope. And so, ultimately, this all comes down to your success criteria. This is all about writing your business plan, right? And the things you can look at is complexity, time, quality, and accuracy. Be able to document them, baseline, clarify, and then put in means to capture the details. I got to say, it's still not an easy thing to capture the supporting data around automation. So there's a lot of dark data within automation. There's a lot of human intervention. Looking at a process right now where we need an operator in a plant to enter a reason code, why there was a drop in performance. Well, that's a really difficult thing to try to get the human who just watches these operator screens to now go investigate and put a code as to why something changed. But without that, you can't then think about ways of optimizing and automating and say, oh, so this machine stops every time this happens. Yeah, there's some anecdotal stuff about the guy who goes out on the floor to clear that condition might be able to tell you, but he can't tell you how often it happens, can't tell you why it happens, can't tell you if there was something upstream that would make it stop happening, because their job is just to clear it. So, where do you get that dark data, right? So there has to be an investment in watching, shadowing. If you can't institute digital technology, sensors, then you have to institute humans to sit there with a clipboard and go, yep, which is why we still see people in cars, on streets, by schools, watching cars go by and documenting. And even there, we don't need it anymore per se, but it still happens. As we were talking about, your metrics are continuum. Don't try to get perfect. Don't try to get down to a specific number, because that specific number is going to change on any given day based on your environment, based on how what's happening elsewhere in your business. But you do need to understand, again, from your boundaries, what is your high-end max, what's your low-end min, and then where do you want to sit 90 or 80% of the time? And are you there? Are you there 80% of the time? If you're not there 80% of the time, you got room. You got room to go. If you're at 60%, you can get to 80 or 90. If you're at maxed at 100, right, you're trying to be too perfect. You probably want to scale back a little, right? So knowing your continuums on these things, understanding these factors, knowing where you sit, that's going to help you get yourself to 80% on these, and you will be running at a good balance between your employees not feeling overburdened, trying to meet goals that they can't meet, and yet the business running very efficiently. And then finally, you set yourself up a process. Your process, anything you're going to measure, you have to baseline. You can't just jump in and say, we're going to start changing this without knowing what you're dealing with. Doesn't matter what it is. Everything I've dealt with so far that's automation, RPA, DevOps, factory automation, right? All of it. You need to know where you stand today. You create your baseline. You break your baseline up into elements of the automation tasks, right? What pieces of these of this baseline now belong to a given particular task or set of tasks? Now, and then once I have my categories, I can then optimize my categories. I can then say, okay, this is my max, this is my min, right? Great. I'm going to clear out all the garbage. I'm going to get rid of the waste, and then I'm going to automate. Now my automation has a set of KPIs coming out of that, things that I know what I want to look like. I know what I do look like. and I have an understanding of what the automation is buying. And then it's a continuous evolution process. You know, you measure and you start all over again.
I love it. I might not have been far off, but I think I definitely learned some stuff, and our audience will too. But now we come to the moment of truth. Sabrina presented it better.
Whew, yeah, this one was much easier than the rest. Hands down. Joe, you know, I felt like JP was being way too nice to you. I think you botched basically the whole thing. I don't know if I learned one thing from you. No, I'm just being sick and crabby. But JP, I got to give this one to you. Like Joe said, we learned a lot, and I liked the flow. So congratulations, Joe. You know, maybe better luck next time. But yeah, nice job, JP.
You ever see the show? Either of you ever see the show House of Lies? Don Cheadle?
I need to.
Oh, hopefully you can still find it out there. It's about management consulting. He's the leader of a pod for a very high-end LA-based management consulting firm. But he's very much like Joe, right? He walks into a room and he says absolutely nothing, but he says it in such a fancy way that everyone just goes, ooh, ah, yes, let's do it.
We're in, yeah. Well, I know that
the art of BS.
This is part of the art. This is why Joe teaches people how to sell solutions.
And this is why, and Joe will back me up on this, sales engineers have the same problem running backs have. They're undervalued. They should be paid way more based upon their ability to score.
Great.
And not based upon what the SE next to them is being paid.
Right. Agreed. Well, JP, this has been fun. It was been educational. It's been a little heartbreaking because I lost yet again on my own show. But you know what? That's part of the game. We really appreciate you coming on. Sabrina, you were here.
I was here. I did.
Throwdown. I like Tech Deck. It's good. Tech Deck Karaoke is great, but very much a throwdown theme to it, you know?
Yeah.
Remember, Bobby Flay lost often on Throwdown with Bobby.
You got to. Well, JP, thank you very much. Sabrina, thanks for being here. And Julia, thanks for putting this all together in the background. We'll see you all next episode.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.